Everyone thinks MGK promotes drugs and chaos, but when this opioid addict told his real story on The Tonight Show, it exposed a truth about music that nobody expected. The Tonight Show studio was electric with its signature Tuesday evening energy in Manhattan. The familiar blue and gold lighting created that warm, inviting atmosphere that had made the show America's favorite late-night destination. Machine Gun Kelly sat confidently across from Jimmy Fallon, both men engaged in what appeared to be a typical celebrity interview about his latest musical evolution and wild lifestyle. The Roots had just finished their smooth musical transition, and the cameras were rolling hot. Jimmy's iconic curved desk gleamed under the professional studio lights, while the New York City skyline sparkled through the backdrop windows like a backdrop of endless possibilities and rock star dreams. MGK looked every inch the rock star he had become. Dressed in a black leather jacket over a vintage band t-shirt, his platinum blonde hair perfectly styled in that deliberately messy way that screamed rebellion. He radiated the kind of dangerous charisma that had made him both beloved and controversial. His numerous tattoos were visible on his arms and neck, each one telling a story of his journey from Cleveland rapper to mainstream rock icon. "So Kells," Jimmy said, using MGK's nickname with the familiarity that came from multiple previous appearances, "you've basically reinvented yourself completely, from rap battles with Eminem to selling out arenas as a rock star. That's not exactly a typical career trajectory." MGK laughed, that confident laugh that had become his trademark. "Man, Jimmy, I've always been about chaos, you know? I don't like being put in boxes. When people say, you can't do that, that's exactly what makes me want to do it more." The audience was clearly enjoying his energy, several young fans in the front rows wearing his merchandise and cheering at his every word. "And the lifestyle that comes with it," Jimmy continued with a knowing grin. "I mean, your social media is just, it's wild. The parties, the late nights, the whole rock and roll lifestyle. How do you even keep up with yourself?" MGK grinned, clearly comfortable with his reputation as a party animal. "Look, I live life to the fullest, man. I don't believe in regrets. I believe in experiencing everything, pushing boundaries, living like there's no tomorrow. That's what rock and roll is about." "That's definitely the image," Jimmy agreed. "And your music reflects that too. Songs like Wild Boy, and even your newer rock stuff. It's all about living on the edge, taking risks." "Absolutely," MGK nodded enthusiastically. "I want my music to make people feel alive, you know? I want them to feel like they can break free from whatever's holding them back. Life's too short to play it safe." The conversation was flowing naturally, touching on his transition from rap to rock, his relationship with Megan Fox, and the controversy that often surrounded his public persona. The studio audience was clearly engaged, feeding off his infectious energy and rebellious charm. "But here's what I find interesting," Jimmy said, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. "Despite all the chaos and the wild reputation, there's something deeper in your music, like Lonely or some of the more introspective tracks. There's real pain there." MGK's expression shifted slightly, becoming more thoughtful. "Yeah, man. That's the thing people don't always get. You can be wild and still be real. You can party hard and still feel everything deeply. I've been through some dark stuff, and music is how I process it all." "And you're not afraid to show that vulnerability," Jimmy observed. "Even in interviews, you're pretty open about your struggles." "I have to be," MGK replied, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "If I'm going to ask people to connect with my music, I have to be honest about who I am. The good, the bad, the messy, all of it." The audience was clearly appreciating this more introspective side of the artist they knew, for his wild antics and provocative behavior. "That honesty, that authenticity, it really resonates with people," Jimmy said warmly. "And I think that's why your fan base is so loyal," MGK nodded. "My fans, they're everything to me. They're the ones who see past the headlines and the drama. They understand that the music comes from a real place." It was in this moment of thoughtful conversation about authenticity and the power of music that a voice from the audience cut through the studio atmosphere with the urgency and clarity of someone who had something life-changing to share. "MGK?" Both MGK and Jimmy turned toward the sound. In the fourth row, slightly right of center, a young man in his mid-20s was standing among the seated audience members. He was thin, almost gaunt, with dark hair and eyes that held the weight of experience far beyond his years. He wore a simple gray hoodie and jeans, and his hands were trembling slightly as he gripped a small piece of paper. "Hey man," MGK responded immediately, his attention completely focused on the young man. "What's your name?" "Tyler," the young man replied, his voice carrying a slight tremor of emotion. "Tyler Matthews from Philadelphia." "Tyler from Philly," MGK repeated with a genuine smile. "What's up, brother? What did you want to tell me?" Tyler took a visible breath, and suddenly the energy in the studio shifted dramatically. The casual conversation about rock stardom and wild lifestyles was about to become something much more personal, much more profound, much more life-altering. "I wanted to thank you," Tyler said, his voice carrying across the now silent studio. "I wanted to thank you for saving my life." MGK's expression immediately became more serious, his rock star confidence replaced by genuine concern and attention. Jimmy leaned forward in his chair, sensing that they were about to enter territory, far more meaningful than typical late-night television. "Tell me what you mean by that, Tyler," MGK said softly, all traces of his usual bravado gone from his voice. 3 years ago, Tyler began, his voice growing stronger as he spoke, "I was addicted to heroin. It started with prescription painkillers after a car accident, but when those got too expensive, I turned to street drugs." The studio fell completely silent. This was no longer entertainment. This was someone's reality, someone's survival story being shared with millions of people. "I lost everything," Tyler continued, tears beginning to form in his eyes, but his voice remaining steady. "My job, my apartment, my family stopped talking to me. I was living on the streets, stealing to get money for drugs, overdosing regularly." MGK was listening intently, his usual animated demeanor replaced by focused compassion as Tyler's story unfolded. 2 years ago, I overdosed for the 5th time, Tyler said. "The paramedics brought me back, but the doctor told me that my body couldn't take another one. He said the next time would probably kill me." The weight of his words settled over the studio like a heavy blanket. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something that transcended entertainment, something that touched the very core of life and death and redemption. "I was in the hospital for a week," Tyler continued, "and my sister, who was the only family member still talking to me, brought me headphones and told me to listen to music instead of thinking about getting high." MGK sat transfixed, clearly understanding that this story was about to become deeply personal. "The first song that came on was Bloody Valentine," Tyler said, and a small smile crossed his face despite his tears. "And I know that sounds crazy because it's not exactly a recovery song, but something about it spoke to me. The energy, the passion, the way you put everything into it." He paused, looking directly at MGK across the studio. "But then I started listening to your other music. Lonely, Glass House, Play This When I'm Gone, and I realized that you were singing about pain I recognized. You were singing about feeling lost, about struggling with demons, about using substances to numb everything." The silence in the studio was profound. MGK looked like he was struggling to process what he was hearing. "But here's the thing," Tyler continued, his voice now strong with conviction. "In your music, even when you're singing about partying or getting messed up, there's always this underlying message that you're still fighting, that you're still alive, that you're turning your pain into something beautiful." MGK's eyes filled with tears, and he seemed unable to speak. "I started listening to your music every day in rehab," Tyler said. "When I wanted to leave, when I thought I couldn't handle being sober, when everything felt impossible, I would put on your songs and remember that someone else had felt this way and made it through." He held up the piece of paper he'd been gripping. "I wrote down lyrics from Glass House and kept them with me through the entire 90 days. I'm living in a glass house and throwing stones at myself. That line saved my life because it made me realize I was my own worst enemy, but I could also be my own salvation." Without hesitation, without consulting producers or following any protocol, Machine Gun Kelly stood up from his chair and walked directly into the audience toward Tyler. "Tyler," MGK said, his voice thick with emotion as he reached the young man's row. "Can I give you a hug, man?" Tyler nodded through his tears, and MGK embraced him firmly, both men crying openly as the studio audience watched this display of human connection. "You're a warrior," MGK whispered, though his words were picked up by the studio microphones. "You're a warrior, brother." When they separated, both men were emotional, but there was something powerful in their shared moment. a recognition between two people who understood the battle against personal demons. "Tyler," MGK said, his hands still on the young man's shoulders. "What you just told me means more to me than any platinum plaque, any sold-out show, any award I could ever win." He turned to address the entire studio audience and the cameras. "This is what music is really about," MGK declared, his usual cocky demeanor replaced by profound humility. "This isn't about the parties or the chaos. This is about connection. This is about letting people know they're not alone in their pain." The studio audience was completely engaged, many openly emotional as they witnessed this unexpected moment of vulnerability. "Tyler just reminded me why I really do this," MGK continued. "Yeah, I party, yeah, I live wild, but underneath all that, I'm just someone who's been through dark stuff and learned that music can be medicine." Jimmy had left his desk and was now standing at the edge of the stage, clearly moved. "And to anyone watching who's struggling with addiction, with depression," MGK said, looking directly into the camera, "I need you to know that your pain doesn't define you. What you do with that pain defines you." He pulled out his phone. "Tyler, I want to give you my personal number. Not for publicity, but because recovery is a daily battle. And if you ever need someone who understands that, fight, I'm here." The audience erupted in applause, but MGK wasn't finished. "And I want you to come to my next show in Philly. I want you backstage, because every night I perform, I'm going to remember this conversation." MGK began speaking about his own struggles. "People think I'm just this crazy party guy, but the truth is, I've battled addiction too. I've been in dark places where I didn't think I'd make it out." The honesty in his voice was startling for those who only knew his public persona. "But Tyler," MGK said, "you found your way out. You took something that could have destroyed you and turned it into strength. That's not just recovery, man. That's transformation." Jimmy addressed both men. "This is why music matters, because sometimes a song can be the difference between life and death." But what happened next was what everyone would remember most. MGK began removing his leather jacket. "Tyler," he said, draping the jacket over the young man's shoulders, "this jacket has been with me through tours, through recording sessions, through some of my biggest moments. I want you to have it as a reminder that you're stronger than any addiction." Tyler, now wearing MGK's signature leather jacket, looked transformed. "And Tyler," MGK continued, "your recovery isn't just about you. Every day you stay clean, you're proving to someone else that it's possible. You're becoming the hope that someone else needs." The show ended differently that night. No standard closing monologue. Just MGK and Jimmy sitting with Tyler as the credits rolled, three people connected by understanding that music could save lives. When the episode aired, it became the most watched Tonight Show segment of the year. Tyler became an advocate for addiction recovery, speaking at treatment centers about finding hope in unexpected places. MGK began partnering with addiction treatment organizations, and every time he performed, he thought about Tyler Matthews, and the night he learned that his music could be the difference between life and death. The night that changed everything wasn't about rock stardom or rebellion. It was about a recovering addict finding hope in unexpected lyrics, and an artist discovering that sometimes the greatest performance is simply being honest about the struggle. Music, it turned out, really could be medicine. One song, one story, one moment of connection at a time.